Hey everyone, this is Victor here with Dapper Dash, and today's video is a special one because it actually came from a comment that I had in one of my videos. So I posted a video on how you can set up dynamic parameters using a direct query. And one of the viewers made the following comment. So I'll post it on the screen, but I'm also going to read it. Can we apply row-level security on a parameterized model? For example, I have a big data set to query into my model, data set for different clients. I need to apply dynamic row-level security into the model using the UserPrincipalName function from DAX. Then, can I use this parameter to query only for the specific client? So what this user is doing essentially is they have an embedded report somewhere on a website. And anytime their clients log in to view the report, they're able to capture the user ID of the client using the UserPrincipalName function from DAX. And my guess is that they leverage the UserPrincipalName inside of a row-level security model. And the problem they're having is that this data model is too large. So they want to leverage dynamic query parameters. And they want to use the client ID that's being passed as a parameter to be sent into the dynamic query. Now I will say that there's no way that you can use a DAX UserPrincipalName function and pass it to the M query, because these are two separate environments, right? DAX is one and then Power Query is another. But there is a way to accomplish this, and that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how you can pass the UserPrincipalName from DAX, so from the row-level security, into a dynamic query so that you only return the data that belongs to the client that's logging in. And I'm going to share that solution with you right now. So let's get started. Alright, so I've set up this demo to show you how we're going to move from row-level security to dynamic parameters. So this setup that I have here is a basic row-level security setup. So I have a table that has just a list of usernames, and that table will then filter a list of sales based on that user logging in. So to look at the row-level security, you'll see I have just one role, the report user who's logging in. And we know the user that's logging in based on the UserPrincipalName. When you embed a report out on a web page, you're able to capture the user that's logging in using the UserPrincipalName in DAX. And once you know who's logging in, you can then filter your row-level security table and filter your report. So I want to show you what that row-level security table looks like. So it's just a table that has 6 users on it. And based on the user logging in, right, with our row-level security, based on who's logging in, for example, if on our web page the report user is titled Harry, then it's going to filter our data set to just Harry. And on here, I have a DAX function that captures the UserPrincipalName, right? Once again, this is a user that's viewing the report. So I'm going to bring it in here just so that we know who's logging in every time that we change users. Okay, so let me show you one more time. If I change user to Hermione, then we're going to capture Hermione and our data set is going to reflect Hermione. Okay, so that's how row-level security works when using the UserPrincipalName. Now, our viewer on the Dapper Dash channel said, hey, this is a good setup. However, it doesn't work for me because this table here, it's a direct query. But what if this database here, this server, doesn't have very many resources? Or what if there's millions and millions of rows that I'm having to filter through using row-level security, and it's starting to really bring the system down, it's too slow, my visuals don't render fast enough. So they are proposing a solution. Is there a way for me to pass the username into this dynamically? But I do want to provide a little bit of warning, is that by design, you cannot pass a DAX function into a Power Query formula. Meaning that PowerBi does not allow you to take this function here and use that as a filter for your query. But what I'm going to show you is a workaround that allows you to accomplish the same thing. So the first thing that I'm going to do in order to show you that we're not using row-level security to filter this table is I'm going to remove this connection here. And what that means is that now when I log in as a user, I'm not filtering my data in any way. And remember, I'm capturing the user that's logging in right here. So let's just say someone runs to my website and their name is Harry. Well, I'm capturing it here, but you'll notice that it's not filtering any of my data anymore. And this is okay for now because I'm going to show you how we're going to filter it using a dynamic parameter. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to set up the dynamic parameter. Okay, so in order to set up the dynamic parameter, first I'm going to stop viewing this as a user. Right, we're going to have to go create the parameter to begin with. So let's go to transform data. I'm going to right click and hit new parameter. Now I'm going to title this user name parameter. And because I'm filtering based on a user, I know that my value is a text. So I'm going to set it to text. And for now, I'm actually going to set the value to nobody. So now I have my parameter created, username parameter. The value is set to nobody. And remember, if I go back to my users table, right, I actually do have someone named nobody here. But this was being used for our row level security. This is actually now going to be used as the table that's going to provide the values for our parameter. So we're not going to touch anything there. We're going to go to our main data set, however. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a filter on the username because that's where I want my dynamic parameter to go. And it doesn't matter what you add. This is just so that I can get this line of code here, right? The one that filters my rows. So now I'm going to update that hard-coded value that I set, and I'm going to change it to be my parameter, username parameter. And remember, my username parameter is nobody, so it's going to filter my main data set to be nobody. So for right now, I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and hit close and apply. So we've accomplished the first two steps of dynamic parameters, which is 1, create your parameter, and 2, filter your main data set by that parameter. So now we're going to go to the next part, which is we're going to bind our parameter. So we're going to click on our username, and over here on the properties, advanced, we're going to go to bind to parameter, and we're going to bind the usernames from this table to our username parameter. Now keep in mind that throughout this whole process, we still have row level security enabled. We still have a rule, meaning that when the user logs in, we're going to filter the table to just that username. And now what we're doing is we're going to use those usernames to send a value to our parameter to filter our main table. So we've created our parameter, we've filtered our main query, we've bound the parameter, and now we got to go add a filter so that we can select different values. So let's go back to our main report here. Remember, right now it's hard-coded to nobody. So let's create a filter. And in this filter, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring in our username. And you're going to see that it's going to auto-select this. It's going to auto-select it to Hagrid. But you can see that it's already working. So if I select Hermione, it's going to filter my query on the back end, and we're only going to see Hermione. Same thing if I select Ronald, we're only going to look at the rows for Ronald. So our dynamic parameter is working, but there is one thing there are a few things that are a little bit off. And the first thing is well, right now we're not impersonating a user who's logging in. Our user principal has not changed, right? Even if we change our filter values, right, we can change our data, but this isn't being filtered dynamically based on the user. So what happens if we try to impersonate a user? So let's log in, and let's say on our web page, Hagrid is logging in, right? Right now we have it filtered to Harry, but let's pretend that Hagrid is logging in. If Hagrid logs in, right, our user principal is capturing Hagrid, but our filter is still pointed to Harry. So we have to point it to Hagrid. And now it's filtering the data. So let me stop viewing for a second. And when I save my report, I'm actually going to save it as nobody, just so that I have a blank report to begin with, right? Now, if I was to save this and publish it, here's the problem. As soon as I publish it to my web page, the user is going to log in. Let's just say it's Harry. Harry's logging in, and there's a problem, right? Harry logged in, but I'm not showing Harry's data yet. What Harry would have to do if he wanted this to work would be to click on his name, and then his data would show up. But it doesn't really mimic the behavior of row level security because our users having to click things, and we don't want them to click anything. We don't want them to even know that there's a filter, a dynamic filter happening on the back end. All we want to do is when they log in, we want to show them their data. But we got to be able to fix this so our user isn't having to click values every time they log in. And here's where the magic happens. Here's the really, really cool part. What you're going to do is you're going to grab a slicer from the Visual Store. I already have it, but you're going to grab the Chiclet slicer. Okay? This is a slicer by the Microsoft Corporation, by Microsoft. So I have it installed already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete my old filter, which is the custom one from PowerBi. Right? It's going to go back to our nobody parameter, which is what we set it to initially, and bring in your Chiclet slicer. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the Chiclet slicer, and now I'm going to use this slicer instead of the old one. So bring in your username from your row level security table that's being filtered. A few things that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the header, and I'm going to remove any header icons. Okay, so now I have my filter, and this is very important here. Here's where the magic is going to happen. Under the general settings for your Chiclet slicer, there's two settings that we're going to fix. One is you're going to take off multiple selection because we don't want to be able to select multiple things. We just want one user. We just want to use the user that's logging in. And the most important button is the force selection. What this button does is it mimics a user clicking a filter. If there's only one value available, it'll click that value. If there's multiple values available, it'll select some value. So we're going to hit force selection, and it looks like it auto defaulted it to Hagrid, which is okay for now, even though Hagrid isn't really logged in. Now, because Hagrid isn't logged in, I'm actually going to default it to nobody to go back to our blank. And now here's what's going to happen. I've selected the filter to nobody. And remember, we're still not impersonating a user. But because we have forced a selection, what happens now is when I log in as, let's say, Harry, right? This is going to filter my user row level security table so that it should only have the value of Harry. And because it only has the value of Harry, it's going to automatically select that. So now if on my web page Hermione was to log in, voila, it automatically selects Hermione, and it passes that value to my dynamic query. Okay, one more, right? We'll just walk through it one more time. If I select Hagrid, boom, Hagrid is selected. Hagrid is who's logged in, and I only see the data for Hagrid. So this is working pretty well. Let me set it back to nobody real quick. So let me stop viewing for a second. I'm going to select nobody. Now, there's still one little thing wrong with this. This actually solves our problem already. But there's one little thing wrong with this, and that's we don't want the user to see this. We want to be able to hide this. So you're going to go up to View. I already had it open, but View Selection. And you might think that the easiest way would be to just click the Hide button, which does hide it. The problem is that actually removes the filter from row level security here. So if I log in as Harry, you'll see that Harry's logged in, but it hasn't changed the value on my filter. So we don't want to do that. You don't want to hide it like that. What you want to do is actually hide it somewhere on the page. Now, I have this text box as a header. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring my selection and bring it all the way down to the bottom so that this object is underneath everything else. I'm then going to reposition my slicer up here to be underneath this text object. So there you go. It's out of the page. It's gone. The last thing to do is if you click on your Chiclet slicer, you go to Format It. Under General, Advanced Options, you want to maintain layer order. This is so that no matter where you click around, this will always be behind our text box, and the user will never see this. So now if I save it and my user logs in, so let's just say Harry's logging in. Bam, we see Harry logged in, and we only see the rows for Harry. We are not connecting these tables in any way, so you're certain that there is no row level security that's filtering this. It's the dynamic parameter that is filtering the table. So now with my if I log in as Hermione, I only see Hermione's data. And that's the solution. I mean, that's pretty much it. It wasn't very difficult. It is a small workaround, but it allows you to capture the user principal and use it as a value in your dynamic query. All right, so be honest. What do you think about that solution? Personally, it is one of the coolest things that I've ever done inside of Power BI. And I've seriously searched for hours trying to find someone that had an answer to this problem in the internet, and I could not find anyone with a solution. What I was able to find is bits and pieces here and there that when I puzzled it all together, I was able to come up with a workaround for being able to leverage that user principal name and row level security with dynamic parameters. And this wasn't just a question that I had from the viewer on that YouTube channel. This was also a problem that I had with a client that I work for. They have several Power BI reports that they embed on a web page, and they capture the users that are logging into those web pages, and using row level security, they're able to filter down their data sets. The problem is that their business got really, really big, really fast, and the direct query and the row level security, it just wasn't able to capture the data quick enough, and we started to have some latency problems with those reports. So when I figured out how we could use that user principal from the user logging in to dynamically filter on the query, we were able to update all of our reports, and they run really smooth, really quick now. And really with dynamic parameters, the possibilities of querying large data sets becomes really, really easy. But anyways, that's all I have for you today. I appreciate you tuning into the channel. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think, if this helped you out, and I'll catch you guys next time.